Whitney here. Welcome to our Thanksgiving week edition of the Passive Investing Made Simple show. I am so honored to be here with you guys. I'm so thankful for you guys. I'm gonna give it a few more minutes for people to file in the room. If this is the first time you joined us, welcome. This is a live show where we go into the ins and outs about passive investing so you can go into your first or next investment with confidence. Be sure to check out, our previous episodes and, get on the registration list for future episodes at passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com. You can also get access to my calendar if you want to talk about all things real estate, as well as our open deals here at passiveinvesting.com. Anyways, guys, I am so excited to be joined here by my favorite partner in crime, Taylor.
Favorites? What? Oh, you're too kind. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah. So anyways, Taylor and I are going to go through the psychology of money today. And so it's not a psychology course. It's a book by Morgan Housel. And so I've got like pages marked here, but Taylor and I were talking about this a few weeks ago, and we're like, this is a subject we really need to cover with our audience because, these questions that we're going to tackle today, these quotes that Taylor's pulled out of the book are super important to pretty much every investor's journey. And we're going to kind of start at the beginning, some of the quotes that people, kind of ask themselves in the beginning, and then we're going to wrap up with some more strategical things. But Taylor, I am totally stealing your thunder here, so I'm going to turn it over to
you. No, it's okay. Oh, one thing I did want to mention too, as well, at least from the beginning, is these are also starting to be posted on wherever you listen to podcasts. So wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure you leave a review. If you have some feedback, leave some 5 stars, and if not, you could still listen to us and just provide some feedback. But you can also listen to it on audio platforms. We're starting to release episodes there as well. And also to preface this too is I didn't actually get to finish the book, but this is the reason why I'm actually looking to learn a lot more from you, considering that you have read the book and you were able to pull these quotes as I read them, just because I feel like with this topic, it's not necessarily that it's a taboo topic. It's so open-ended depending on how we grew up with money, how we have built that relationship with money. And so I'm just really excited to dive in and then even see how it pertains to real estate and how it pertains to just our own investment journeys and what we're trying to accomplish. And that is actually an interesting start to this conversation, though, is I feel like every time I do hop on, the main common theme that we always touch on is with the end in mind. What are we actually trying to accomplish, and what do our goals even look like? And so with this first quote, it's about just the concept of enough, and I'll read it to you right here, and I'd love to know your thoughts and feedback on that. But the idea of enough might seem like conservatism, leaving opportunity and potential on the table. I don't think that is right. Enough is realizing that the opposite, an insatiable appetite for more, will push you to the point of regret.
Yeah, I love that quote. So many times I hop on the phone with investors, and you do too, Taylor. And there's 2 things that happen. One, they are trying to replace their income. And sometimes that is actually the wrong number to start with, because, they could probably, the first milestone is actually, and this is something I'm excited to talk about in our December's boot camp, is the first milestone to actually hit when you start passive investing is much lower than replacing income largely, especially if your income is, we work with a lot of high net worth people. Now, the second concept is that people are there's a scarcity mindset, when you start, getting into passive investing, and you continue to move the goalpost, right? Where you're at, like I know a lot of passive investors, they start off at $10,000 a month, and then you get close to 10, they're like, I need 15. And then they get close to 15, I need 20. And it's just like, okay, let's actually center around what is enough. And it's not a failure, and enough is going to differ from person to person. But having an understanding of what your true numbers are and what that enough number is for you, or that exit number. And that is something we're going to talk a lot about here in December with our goal setting. That's really, really kind of what we want to kind of center the conversation around, because you can always pursue for more, but if it never gets you out of the rat race, like that's the regret, right?
Right.
And it's something that my husband and I, we've been on a journey for, trying to figure out what is that number that is enough. We've got well into the 5 figures coming in monthly, and but we're in Arkansas right now, like mountain biking with our family during Thanksgiving week. Those are the things. So what are your, think in terms when you're thinking about enough, like what are your hobbies, like what would get you out of work, or allow you to kind of step back, have time and work. And then again, realizing that the concept of enough is so individualized, and you have to figure out what that actually means for you. You can always go further, right? It's not a cop out. It's not failure, right? You can always go further, but just, understanding, okay, life's good if I got to a certain amount of passive income coming in. That's what it means to me.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to touch on too, and I know whether you had this at a previous conversation about the idea of enough, is I feel like with enough, it doesn't always necessarily equate to an actual number as well. I feel like that's where we start in terms of, this is how much I want to have in passive income. This is how much I want to make, per month. This is how much equity I want to have by this date. And this is very, I guess, it's a quantifiable measure. But then when you take into the account the other aspects of life, how much time am I spending with my family? Is that enough time that I'm spending with my family? Am I having enough time traveling? And so I feel like the dynamics of enough, it can definitely vary depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that starting at that price point is great, but then discovering that why behind that price point is.
There's an amazing book that I love. It's called How Leadership Actually Works. It's by Larry Yatch. Not to throw another book out at everybody. But so he's a Navy SEAL. Maybe a lot of people are familiar with who Jocko Willink is. He kind of falls into that camp. I loved it because here's this like really tough Navy SEAL, served in Afghanistan, right along like all the big greats that we know that came out of that time in service. And his whole concept of enough, he goes, you have to understand, how do you want to feel when you hit a goal? And I just sat there and I'm like, seriously, Navy SEAL talking about feelings? Who is this person? But I think that is really what we're striving here. Like it's not a number, because the number has no emotion. It has no tangible like return to it. It's how does that number make you feel? Like, how are you going to feel when you hit that? And that's kind of, loosely tied to this concept of enough.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, at least digging deep, and as you were speaking, so with something else that also caught into mind. So I personally don't have kids, but I can also assume, at least when people do have kids, they sort of grow up in this social media environments where there's all these new shiny objects being thrown at them. You have a little kid that's reviewing toys making $1 million a year. You have people the same age that are just influencers now, and they're just making a chunk of money. And I feel like, and I sometimes get caught on this too, is just that shiny object. It's like, okay, I'm that same age. I would love to have what they want, but I don't necessarily know if that's because everybody else thinks that's cool and that is enough, and that's what I really want in life, or if that's truly what I want. And so, it goes back to what we were just saying, is that there's really the self-awareness journey of just really discovering what you really and truly want. I mean, of course, it's a journey, and you're not going to figure it out right then and there. And it's exciting to at least find as you go through this journey of life.
Yeah, sometimes you take detours and it takes a while to figure it out.
Yeah. And I think this brings, now transitioning into just at least like this next quote then, is when we talk about enough. I mean, we're talking about the price point, we're talking about if that is how we quantify it. I think there is a difference between being rich versus wealthy as well. And so I'll read this quote here from the book. Rich is current income. Spending money to show people how much money you have is the quickest way to not have money. Wealth is hidden. It's income not spent. Wealth is an option not yet taken to buy something later. Wealth is hard and requires self-control.
Yeah, this was a big lesson for me in the book, because especially like on my real estate journey, and I think others would echo this as well. You're after that number, and maybe you're trying to like get out of, reduce your time at work, or take your family on more vacations, or buy a new car. We're in the process of trying to buy a new car. One of our cars is failing.
Oh no.
I know. Well, we chose to drive. I mean, it's 17 years old. We've chosen to drive it into the ground. So, but anyways, diversion here. But long story short is there. Just because somebody has the dollars in their bank account coming in, right? Freedom is when you have enough passive income coming in that covers your expenses. That's one part of that dynamic. But then you got to couple it, so you might have money coming in, somebody might be spending it on toys, but really, again, we're getting kind of more to the peeling back the layers, the onion. Like wealth is really, are you able to feed like your spirituality? Are you able to, support your health? Are you able to support those relationships and build those relationships around you with your family, with your friends? Then there's also all the financial pieces of wealth, right? So wealth is actually not just the money part, right? And money is a tool to help us feed these other areas of our life. And so this is one of the reasons why I help people understand the 7 pillars of passive investing, like how to, line up their investing goals for capital preservation, cash flow, appreciation, tax benefits, good use of leverage, great use of leverage in this environment, inflation hedging, and then investing with experts. Because, a lot of people think it's just cash flow or it's just appreciation. That's what a good investment is. That will make them rich. Maybe, but wealth is really truly built whenever you have all these like areas in your life kind of more well-rounded, like you would with your investments.
Now, with being rich, I feel like there's a lot of role models out there. I mean, you can go on Instagram, you can go on Twitter, you can go on wherever you view media. There's going to be just so many, I guess, role models that show just to be rich. But the difficulty, though, is at least like with wealth, it is and can be a little bit more hidden, where they're not as flashy, but they have the freedom to be able to choose whatever they want and how they decide on how they spend their time. Now, in your experience, how have you cut through the noise then to find wealthy role models that you really truly look up to?
Oh, that's such an amazing question. I think that's part of the journey, right? I think, I think it's at first, I think you don't really know, right? Like, people kind of step into like, the financial independence, retire early movement, or into passive investing. And again, they're kind of like looking at how do I replace my income or my expenses. And then as they go down this path, they were like, oh, I can have freedom of time. I can have freedom of location independence. I can have freedom of choice. I can have freedom of impact, right? It's like peeling back the layers of the onion. And every time you hit like one of those ceilings of achievement, for all practical purposes, you're going to need a person or a process to help you move forward. And it's going to become in the form of coaches. It's going to come in the form of mentors. It's going to come, in tapping into somebody else's process that they have so you can take advantage of it. And so one of the ways to answer your question really directly that people can, kind of like figure out who they want to follow is look for like a coach or a mentor. Now, here's the thing. If you don't always have to pay for that, right? You
Mm.
know, so I mean, I've chosen to pay for coaching, when I want to kind of like take a piece of paper and collapse time, right? I don't want the shortest line between 2 points is a straight line until you fold the paper in half. Now you've collapsed time, right? But be careful of who you follow on podcasts and YouTube shows, and you can really kind of like suss out, a lot of people, like I consider Tony Robbins a mentor of mine. I've never hired him as a coach. But I mean, I listen to him all the time. So I think, really just being really kind of careful on who your 5 people that you surround yourself with, right? Very famous quote there.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a good point as well, as I'm like reflecting on my journey too. And so I didn't have the pleasure of just having the capital to hire a coach or hire a mentor. And so I went the other way around, as I didn't know anybody in the industry, to at least start a podcast and start to expand my network. And in a way, I treated those guests, and as I was learning more about the industry, learning about them, I sort of decided what I liked, what I didn't like, what I was really going for, and the different values that I valued as I was starting to interview all these guests and have my own coaching sessions. And now I have the pleasure of just having a few different mentors that I still talk to this day and just still look up to. But I do believe that at least if you put it out into the universe, in what you want, it eventually is going to come back to you.
Absolutely. And whether you like start your own podcast, or you're just like me, who's like, I don't, chasing kids, I don't need, I need to start a podcast. I turned my phone into a real estate university is what I did. And here's the cool thing, right? Like you talk about networking and trying to figure out the rich versus wealthy part. I started reaching out to those people that I was listening to. Like not just the host, but the guests that I was hearing. And here's the thing, those guests, if anybody's a guest on a show, they want you to, that's the whole point. They want you to contact them. They're putting something out into the world, and they want, hopefully they're impacting your life, but they want something back too. They want to know like their influence on you, or, maybe build their business or whatever. So yeah, reach out to those people and get to know them a little bit and figure out kind of which camp do they fall into, the rich or the wealthy. I love following Warren Buffett, and then it wasn't until, I don't know, probably like 5-7 years into my investing journey that here we were trying to like up level our house. We have like a little small house in Boulder, Colorado, and he's lived in his house. Here's this investing giant. He's lived in the same house for 30 years or 35 years now in Omaha, Nebraska. And I was just like, that again, they're hidden, right? You talked about wealth being hidden.
Right. And now I want to dive into at least just the definition of wealth from the book. And this was quoted: the highest form of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. Happiness is a complicated subject because everyone is different. It's that people want to control their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think again, this goes back to, kind of similar to that concept of enough. And I once heard Tony Robbins say that absolute freedom is to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, whenever you want. And I was like, how cool is that? And of course, the time that I heard, and it took like 5 or 6 times of me hearing this quote over years. Because the first time I was like, no way. I was working a W-2 job, and I'm like, that's for somebody else. And then, I started like buying homes, getting a little bit into real estate. I'm like, okay, I can kind of see how this goes down. And the further I got down the rabbit hole, I'm like, oh, this is intriguing. I remember, and this is many years ago, I think it was like 2015, I got laid off from my job right around the holidays. I knew it was coming. We were being acquired. My department that I was working in would rarely survive a merger acquisition. And I got everybody above me and below me had already been laid off. And then I finally got my like pink slip. And for the first time in 11 years, I'm like, I get to spend the holidays with my family. We had rental income coming in. And, at first, nobody likes being laid off. I was in tears. And then like and I had 2 properties under contract. I had to pass up to my lender what happened. He was like, I'm sorry, you can't buy the properties. And I hung up the phone. My husband walked in the door. He, ran, and we were supposed to go out of town and go camping. He walked in the door, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the lender's not going to lend to me because I don't have a job. And I'm like, oh, wait a second, you have a job. By the end of the day, we had all the properties moved to him. And then I was like, wait a second, we've got a few $1,000s coming in net, a month. I'm like, I don't have to run out and go get another job. Like we can muddle our way through for several months. Like we could have muddled our way through for a long time. And that's really when that concept of wealth landed for me. I was like, I get to spend time our daughter was probably 3 at the time. And I'm like, here I get to spend time with her during the holidays. I found another job within like 2 weeks, and they were like, we want you to start the 1st of December. I was like, nope. I'll see you in January 8th. And they're like, no, we really need you to start. And I'm like, sorry. And that's power, right? That's, you get to kind of, again, call your shots. And for me, that was the definition of happiness, right? I wanted to have the choice on what I did and how I created impact in that world. And that was both in my family and then, in my job, so.
Now, at that point, you understood the concept of wealth, but what was the time horizon from, let's say, when you got laid off? And sorry to this day until that you got laid off, but I mean, it worked out in your favor. But now, what was that time horizon until you realized that you were wealthy? Like, because I feel like with wealth, and when people talk about wealth, sometimes it seems so far out into the distance that, you might be wealthy right now and you don't, even though it doesn't necessarily feel like it. So I mean, you understood the concept at that time when you were realizing that, hey, I can do what I want and I can spend time with my family. But was that also the same time that you actually realized that you were wealthy, or were you still striving for that concept of wealth?
I had wealth in my life. And I think, the number was just a number to hit that, again, like at what point do you feel, mostly for women, this is a great psychological point. Most women want to feel secure. They're afraid of becoming bad ladies. I heard this, somebody else pointed out to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they totally nailed. That's like, I'm trying to figure out how to put, food on the table and keep the lights and the heats on. And I'm not saying men don't want that, but men, largely, like from a psychological standpoint around money, are more of hunter and gatherers, right? That's just our hard wiring. And I think what, helped me kind of flip the switch is, when I got laid off, I'm like, oh, well, our bills are paid. Did we have enough to go travel the world and do what we do now? No, we didn't. But that's when I was like, I've got that first tier of wealth. Like I have that security. I have financial security. Now we have a little bit of financial vitality. Like we could still travel like during the holidays and see family and friends. We didn't have to like shut it all down. And I was like, this is real. We just continue to add to our investments. Now we've got like financial independence. We continue to let our investments grow. Now we're going to hit financial freedom. And now where we're at now, we want to continue to let our investments grow again and have that absolute freedom. So there's tiers here, right? And again, it kind of, circling back to the beginning, that concept of enough, you have to understand how do you want to feel it, each to know, when you're going to transition into each one of these tiers. For me, like I don't have to like go travel Europe to have ultimate financial freedom. Somebody else, might need that might be what they require, right? So again, these concepts of enough and wealth are a little nebulous. You have to kind of like settle on that feeling. There's a hard number to it, right? But a lot of this is so psychological and so emotionally driven.
Yeah, there's perspective behind that number, and Yeah. And which also, I guess, brings us to this next quote then, in terms of like what we can do now then, and to go on that journey of being wealthy or wealthier, is the definition of investing. And I mean, that's what brought us all here within this community, is investing. And so I'll read this quote here. Investing is not a hard science. It is a massive group of people making imperfect decisions with limited information about things that will have a massive impact on their well-being, which can make even smart people nervous, greedy, and paranoid.
Yeah, that quote. Again, this is one of the lessons that I learned from the book. For people that join late, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I think, Taylor, you and we've talked several times with investors, and they were like, give me, help me understand the exact model so I can vet a deal and like always hit a home run or not lose any money. And that's the thing, is that everybody, it depends on what your goals are, what your risk tolerance is, when in the market cycle you're willing to invest. And that then is going to drive what type of operators you work with, what type of markets you invest in, what type of deals you go to that you invest in. There's not a hard and fast playbook to follow. I mean, I really try to help, for anybody that's attended any of the boot camps that we do here at passiveinvesting.com, I really try to help people tangibly work through the questions that they need to consider. So by the time you get done with that hour and a half, 2 hours, of training, you actually are walking away with some sort of tangible tool that you can use to help you, either set your goals, determine your exit numbers. That's what we're going to be working on in December, to how to, what is your vetting structure like with an operator, what markets and what type of deals would work best for your portfolio. But really at the end of the day, again, I love this quote, it's, investing is not a hard science. And the reason is because you are betting on people. You're either betting on yourself if you're building your own portfolio, or if you're investing passively, you're, betting on an operator to, I always use the quote, bet on the jockey, not the horse, right? Like, it's a people business.
Yeah, absolutely. As much as we can look at the returns, look at the numbers, look at the track record, look at the pro formas. There's so many numbers out there. It doesn't paint the entire picture. And even, I guess, even when you're looking at really whatever investment, you can even look at stocks, right? Seeing what the CEO is doing. I mean, granted, you won't be able to have a conversation with that CEO, let's say using Elon Musk, for example. But I mean, there are people that believe in him and therefore invest in his products. And I feel like that's, similar with, it's not just trying to guess where that dip is and get lucky about that dip. And same with us here is, there are a lot of great operators out there, but it's really deciding if they have the same values, if they have the same pillars, the same foundation, and just the same beliefs and perspective that you do as well, and making sure that you have those alignment of interests.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And talking about, and we've had multiple conversations of vetting the operator, betting on the operator. I think this goes well hand in hand with just the investment strategy and what the quote says in the book. So I'll read this quote here about investment strategy. My investment strategy doesn't rely on picking the right sector or timing the next recession. It relies on a high savings rate, patience, optimism that the global economy will create value over the next several decades. I spend virtually all of my investing effort thinking about those three things, especially the first two, which I can control.
Yeah. So when I read this book, I went in, there's 33 lessons to learn in this book. So I really only picked the top 5, for this segment of the conversation that really resonated with me. But you get to the end and, I think a lot of people, get to the end and you're just like on edge, like, what does he do? Like, should I copy him? And then, you get to this quote, you're just like, oh, okay. So I don't have that roadmap, right? And so that's when I had to go back and really pull out what my roadmap was. And what I realized is that in my roadmap, I do have that high savings rate. I had that patience because I always invest according to 7 pillars. And I'll share with everybody those 7 pillars here in a second. And because I have this checklist of 7 pillars and a good vetting process, once I get to the end of that vetting process, I can be pretty optimistic, especially if that investment's checked all the boxes, the operators checked all the boxes. I can be optimistic that that investment is probably going to be a good bet. Right. And so really, when I was like sitting here going, wah, 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 I don't have a roadmap. I was like, wait, what we've been sharing here and what we've been doing it's just that, he shared it in 3 words, or 5 words: high savings rate, patience, and optimism. We kind of, tease it out a little bit more. And for anybody like listening right now, we have other webinars that you can refer back to. Feel free to reach out to me at whitney@passiveinvesting.com. I can share with you those links. But, the 7 pillars, investing for assets that have capital preservation, that have cash flow today, not future cash flow, but cash flow today. Okay. And have a good solid plan in place to grow that cash flow. Invest in assets that are going to appreciate. And, this isn't gambling, right? There are certain things that we can show you how to do in order to vet markets, operators, and deals that can stack a lot of investing cards in your favor to where appreciation, is probably going to be a good bet. Invest in assets that have tax benefits to them. Why? Well, I mean, one, like, who wants to pay taxes? I mean, raise your hand if you do. No, just kidding. But really, the depreciation of real estate is one of the largest tax shelters that there are out there. We just did a full webinar on the 3 forms of depreciation a couple weeks ago. I'm so excited here in a couple weeks to have Yona Weiss on to talk to us about bonus depreciation on that huge tax incentive that we can take advantage of here for a couple more years. Then you get into like good use of leverage. You can't take out a loan to invest in the stock market. I mean, you can, but if you put that on your bank underwriting statement, they're going to go, no, a whole lot of no. But you can take out a personal loan and you can invest in the stock market. Yes, that is true. So just good use of leverage. And then, we talk about assets that have inflation hedging, like, where you can secure them in today's dollars and the rate of inflation will erode the loan away, but also so you can adjust the income and expenses on the property, as inflation occurs. That's one of the reasons why we love real estate. And then again, betting on operators, whether you're the operator and you're operating your portfolio yourself, you're working through property management, or you're working through passive operators like us here at passiveinvesting.com. Those are like the pillars, to that plan.
Perfect. And as we're wrapping up this episode, at least just for this portion, before we go into our Q&A and just AMA after this, what is the one big takeaway you want listeners to get from this episode?
Well, I put a quote on here is that, and I loved it. I mean, he essentially opens the book. Morgan Housel opens the book and he said, people do crazy things with their money, but no one is crazy. So that really kind of like resonated with me because on so many levels, but really like nobody's right and nobody's wrong. I think we just, we all have to like understand where are we at in our journey, and that journey is going to change how we operate with our money. I really encourage everybody to read the book, and I would love to hear from all of our listeners what they got from the book. Jot it down in the Q&A section. Let's talk about it here afterwards if you read the book. But what is that? I'm going to turn the tables, Taylor. Like, what is one of the biggest takeaways you hope listeners got from this episode?
Yeah, for this one, it's not that what's the best way that I can put this in a very articulate way and in concise way? Because a lot of it was actually in the beginning, and I started to have this aha moment where, wealth, there is a number attached to it, but there is also a little bit more of a perspective to it as well, with identifying the wealth that we have in our lives. And so I was thinking personally about my own journey. I have not hit the number yet of where I want to be, but I do have a lot of wealth in my life, especially being here in the time where, I felt, it's not that I felt like I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, whenever I please, but actually stepping into this position from going from recruiting to now, there was just a big shift of just actually doing what I love, doing what I want, and being surrounded with just like-minded individuals. And so, I guess that would be my biggest takeaways. I mean, the perspective part, and leading into actually this week with it being Thanksgiving. I mean, just being grateful for the blessings that have come into my life, and then also just being surrounded by rock stars like yourself, and then also the people and the attendees that have joined us today.
Awesome. Well, I think this is a perfect place for us to wrap up. You guys, thank you so much for joining us today in our conversation, especially during this wonderful time of year. Thank you for spending your number one resource, which is your time, not only with us, but investing in yourself. I hope you guys enjoyed us taking a break from some of the more tactical parts of investing and really tapping into more of the psychological side of investing. And, if you want to join us for future episodes of Passive Investing Made Simple Masterclass, be sure to go to passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com. You can register there, and you can also check out our open deals. If you're here live, don't go anywhere.